The scent of lemon oil and old paper is the first thing that greets you in my house. It's the smell of a life well lived. A life I shared with my Arthur for 52 years. Every corner of this small suburban home is a testament to him, a quiet museum of our love. The oak bookcase he built with his own hands, the slight dip in the armchair where he read the paper every morning, the faint, sweet aroma of his pipe tobacco that, after a decade, still clings to the curtains in his study. But the heart of it all, the holiest of holies, sits in our bedroom. It's a dark cherry wood chest, smooth and cool to the touch, that Arthur brought back from his service in Vietnam. He always called it his memory box, and inside, nestled in a bed of deep blue velvet, lay the tangible proof of his sacrifice and his honor. Inside that chest were his letters home, their pages thin as moth wings, his dog tags, and the medals. Oh, the medals! A Bronze Star for Valor, a National Defense Service Medal, and the one that always made my breath catch in my throat, the Purple Heart. Its ribbon was slightly faded, the bronze profile of Washington resolute and solemn. It wasn't just metal and fabric to me, it was the price of his survival. It was the shrapnel that stayed in his leg for the rest of his life, the limp he never complained about, the nightmares he fought in his sleep. These weren't decorations. They were scars made noble. They were Arthur. And it was my sacred duty to protect them, to honor them as I had honored him. This duty extended to our family, especially to our only grandson, Leo. He was our daughter's boy, a lanky 20-year-old with his grandfather's eyes, but none of his quiet strength. I loved him, of course. How could I not? I saw him as a continuation of Arthur's legacy, a future my husband didn't live to see. That's why from the day he was born, I started his college fund. Every week, for 20 years, I'd take a little from my pension and Social Security, sometimes just $20, sometimes $50 if I could manage it, and deposit it into that account. I'd imagine him at a university, studying engineering like his grandfather wanted to, building a life of his own. The account was now a formidable sum, over $80,000, a monument of disciplined love I had painstakingly built for him. It was my promise to Arthur that I would give our boy the head start in life that we never had. I thought he understood that. I thought he understood value. I was wrong. Leo came by on a Tuesday afternoon, which was unusual. He usually only visited when he needed something. A sad truth I tried to ignore. He slouched into the kitchen, his phone already in his hand, and gave me a perfunctory kiss on the cheek that smelled of cheap vape juice. "Hey, Grandma, what you up to?" he asked, his eyes already scanning the countertops for any cookies I might have baked. "Just tidying up, dear," I said, drying my hands on my apron. "Would you like some iced tea?" "Nah, I'm good." "Listen, I'm in a bit of a jam." Here it comes, I thought. The familiar preamble to a request for cash. Me and a couple of buddies are trying to drive up to the lake this weekend. You know, just to get away before the summer semester starts. But my car's on empty, and I'm a little short on cash. I was wondering if you could spot me like $50, just for gas money. I'll pay you back on Monday, promise. I sighed, leaning against the counter. It was the same story every time. "Leo, we've talked about this. You have a part-time job. Part of growing up is learning to budget your money." I tried to keep my tone gentle, educational, not scolding. "That money is for your responsibilities. Gas, food, your phone bill. A trip to the lake is a luxury." He rolled his eyes, a gesture he thought was subtle but was as loud as a slamming door. "Okay, fine, whatever. It's not a big deal." He shoved his phone in his pocket and started to wander through the house, a restless energy about him I didn't like. He ended up in my bedroom, lingering near the dresser where I keep my jewelry box. I followed, a knot of unease tightening in my stomach. He then drifted over to the memory chest. "What's in here again?" he asked, running his hand over the polished lid. "You know what's in there, Leo," I said, my voice a little sharper than I intended. "Your grandfather's things. They are not to be touched." Yeah, I know. Metals and stuff, right?" He tapped the lid once more, a hollow sound echoing in the quiet room. He gave me a thin smile. "Cool, well, I gotta go. See ya, Grandma." He was out the door before I could say another word, the screen door slapping shut behind him. I stood there for a long moment, the silence of the house feeling suddenly heavier. I told myself I was being a silly old woman, that my suspicion was unfair. But as I walked over to the chest, I couldn't shake the cold feeling that had settled deep in my bones. I ran my hand over the lid, just as he had, and the wood felt colder, somehow violated. For 2 days, I pushed the unease away. I told myself I was being paranoid, projecting my anxieties onto a careless but ultimately harmless young man. It was on Thursday morning, during my weekly dusting, that I allowed the doubt to become a full-blown investigation. My routine was as fixed as the North Star. I'd dust the furniture, polish the silver frames, and once a month I would open Arthur's chest. I'd air out the letters and gently wipe the metals with a soft, dry cloth, my own private ceremony of remembrance. It wasn't the scheduled day, but I couldn't wait. My hands trembled slightly as I lifted the heavy cherry wood lid. The scent of cedar and old love wafted up to greet me, a smell that usually brought comfort, but today was laced with dread. The letters were there, tied in their faded red ribbon. His dog tags were there, resting in their usual spot. But the small, velvet-lined tray where the medals lay was disheveled. The fabric was scuffed, and a deep rectangular impression was starkly visible where the Purple Heart's case should have been. My heart hammered against my ribs. I lifted the tray out, my breath catching in a sob. Beneath it, where the Bronze Star and the other service medals should have been, there was nothing. Just the dark blue velvet, empty and accusing. A wave of dizziness washed over me, and I had to grip the edge of the chest to steady myself. No, it couldn't be. I frantically searched the rest of the chest, my careful arrangements now a chaotic mess as I dug through photos and papers. Maybe I'd moved them. Maybe I'd put them somewhere safer and forgotten. I spent the next hour tearing my own house apart. I checked my jewelry box, the safe in the closet, the drawers of my nightstand, the pockets of old coats. With every empty drawer and vacant box, the denial peeled away, leaving behind the raw, sickening certainty of the truth. Leo. The way he lingered in the room, his casual question, the feigned interest, the jangling sound I'd faintly heard as he walked away, which I'd dismissed at the time as his keys. It wasn't his keys. It was the sound of my husband's honor being carried out of my home like pocket change. The thought didn't just break my heart, it filled it with a cold, hard substance that felt like ice. The grief I felt was sharp and fresh, but it was quickly being consumed by a slow-burning rage. He hadn't just stolen from me. He had stolen from a dead man who had given everything for his future. The ice in my veins propelled me into action. There was no time for tears, no room for the weakness of sorrow. I grabbed my purse and the keys to my old Buick, the car Arthur had bought me for our 40th anniversary. The engine turned over with a familiar rumbling groan, a loyal sound in a world that had suddenly become treacherous. I didn't know for certain where Leo would go, but I had a sickeningly strong hunch. There was a part of town we always avoided, a stretch of road dotted with check-cashing stores, bail bondsmen, and a handful of pawnshops with garish neon signs and barred windows. It was a place for desperate people to trade their possessions, and their dignity, for a pittance. I knew Leo had sold an old game console at one of them last year. He'd bragged about it, proud of the $40 he'd gotten. I drove with a focus I hadn't felt in years, my knuckles white on the steering wheel. The familiar, tree-lined streets of my neighborhood gave way to cracked pavement and sun-bleached storefronts. I scanned each one, my eyes peeled for Leo's beat-up red Civic, and then I saw it. It was parked haphazardly in front of a shop called Easy Cash Pawn and Loan. The sign flickered pathetically in the afternoon sun, a dying yellow light. My breath hitched. I pulled my Buick across the street, parking behind a large delivery truck where I could watch without being seen. My car idled for a moment, the air conditioning struggling against the heat, the fan blowing the scent of old vinyl and dust around me. It felt like I was in a movie, a spectator to the ugliest scene of my life. Through the grimy front window of the pawn shop, I could see him. Leo was leaning on the counter, his back mostly to me. He was talking to a heavy-set man with a greasy ponytail, and then I saw it. I saw him slide something small and dark across the glass countertop. The man picked it up. Even from across the street through a dirty window, I recognized the distinctive shape of the Purple Heart's case. The man opened it, holding the metal up to the light, its bronze surface catching a stray sunbeam. Leo was nodding, a nervous, eager look on his face. He was haggling over the price of his grandfather's courage, haggling over the cost of his blood, sweat, and sacrifice. The phrase he'd used echoed in my mind, a cruel, mocking ghost. Just for gas money. At that moment, something inside me snapped. The loving, doting grandmother was gone, and in her place was a woman forged in the same fire of righteous anger that had once earned her husband his medals. I turned off the car, took a deep, steadying breath, and opened the door. The heat of the asphalt hit me as I crossed the street, my sensible shoes making a firm, determined sound on the pavement. I felt a strange calm settle over me, the kind of clarity that comes when all doubt has been burned away. A small bell chimed as I pushed open the heavy glass door of the pawn shop. The air inside was stale, thick with the smell of cigarettes and desperation. It was a graveyard of forgotten dreams, dusty guitars, outdated electronics, and a case of sad-looking jewelry. Leo and the pawnbroker both turned to look at me. Leo's face went from eager to ashen in a heartbeat. His mouth fell open, and for a second, he looked like a little boy caught with his hand in the cookie jar. The pawnbroker, a man whose face was a roadmap of cynicism, just raised a bushy eyebrow. On the counter between them lay my Arthur's medals, scattered like cheap trinkets on the scratched glass. The Purple Heart was out of its case, its ribbon lying limply beside it. "Grandma," Leo stammered, his voice cracking. What are you doing here?" I ignored him. My eyes were fixed on the man behind the counter. I walked forward until I was standing right beside my grandson, though I didn't look at him. "Those belong to me," I said, my voice low and steady without a trace of a tremor. "They are stolen property." The pawnbroker looked from me to Leo, a smirk playing on his lips. "This your grandma, kid?" He was just telling me these were his grandpa's. Said he had permission to sell. "He is a liar," I stated, the words as cold and hard as river stones. I met the man's gaze. "They are the war medals of my late husband, Sergeant Arthur Jensen. The Purple Heart was awarded for shrapnel he took at Quezon. The Bronze Star was for pulling 3 men out of a burning APC. Their value is not something you can calculate in dollars. Now give them to me." Leo was tugging at my sleeve. "Grandma, stop! It's not a big deal. I was just going to get some gas money. I was going to buy them back on Monday, I swear." "Buy them back?" I finally turned to him, and the look on my face must have been terrifying, because he flinched. "You think honor has a price tag you can pay off like a credit card? You think you can pawn a man's soul and then buy it back when it's convenient?" I gestured to the medals. "This is his legacy. And you were about to sell it for a weekend at the lake." The pawnbroker, to his credit, seemed to understand he was on the losing side of this equation. He sighed, probably realizing the paperwork involved in handling stolen military medals wasn't worth the $50 he was about to offer Leo. He pushed the medals and the velvet case toward me. "Look, lady, no harm, no foul, just take 'em. I don't want no trouble." I carefully, lovingly placed each medal back into the velvet tray, my fingers brushing over the cool metal. I closed the lid, holding the box to my chest. I turned and walked out of that dreadful place without another word to my grandson. I could hear him calling after me, "Grandma, wait, please!" But I didn't stop. The bell chimed my exit, and I walked back into the sunlight, leaving him behind in the darkness and the dust. The drive home was a blur. The righteous fury that had propelled me to the pawn shop had receded, leaving behind a profound and aching emptiness. I carried the memory chest into the house and placed it gently on the dining room table, the afternoon sun casting long shadows across the polished wood. I sat there for a long time, just looking at it. My phone buzzed incessantly on the counter, Leo, no doubt, with a barrage of texts and calls filled with pathetic excuses and hollow apologies. I ignored it. This was a moment for silence, for contemplation. Finally, I opened the chest again. I took out a soft polishing cloth from my cleaning kit, and one by one, I lifted out the medals. I started with the Purple Heart. I held it in the palm of my hand, its weight feeling both immense and sacred. As I gently wiped away the grime of the pawn shop counter and the phantom fingerprints of strangers, memories of Arthur flooded my mind. I remembered him wincing when he stood up too fast, a subtle reminder of the metal still lodged in his leg. I remembered him waking from nightmares, his face slick with sweat, his hands clenched as if still fighting a long-dead enemy. He had carried the cost of this metal every single day. He had earned it. Next, I polished the bronze star. I remembered the awe I felt when he first told me the story, his voice quiet and humbled, deflecting any praise. He didn't see himself as a hero. He just saw men who needed help. He saw his duty. That was Arthur. A man of quiet action, of profound integrity. He built our home. He raised our daughter. He provided for us. He loved me. He built a legacy of honor, hard work, and responsibility. As I placed the last shining metal back in its velvet cradle, the contrast between the man who had earned them and the boy who had tried to sell them was a chasm too wide to bridge. Leo didn't just fail to understand the metal's sentimental value, he failed to understand the very concept of value itself. To him, $80,000 in a college fund was an abstract future, but $50 in his pocket was a tangible reality. He had proven, in the most painful way imaginable, that he did not value legacy. He did not value sacrifice. He did not value the foundation others had built for him. He saw it all as something to be liquidated for his immediate gratification. And in that moment, sitting at my dining room table with the restored symbols of my husband's honor, I made a decision. It was not born of anger anymore, but of a cold, hard clarity. A financial legacy is meaningless to someone who spits on a moral one. The college fund was a gift for the man I hoped Leo would become. It was now clear that man would never exist. The next morning I dressed with purpose. I put on my good navy blue dress, the one I wore to church, and a string of pearls Arthur had given me for our 30th anniversary. I did my hair, applied a touch of lipstick, and looked at the resolute woman in the mirror. There were no tears in her eyes, only determination. I gathered the most recent bank statements for the college fund and placed them neatly in my handbag. I was ready. The bank was cool and quiet, a temple of commerce with marble floors and the soft hum of computers. It smelled of money and process. I bypassed the tellers and went straight to the desk of the branch manager, a kind-faced man named Mr. Harris, who had helped me with my mortgage years ago. "Eleanor," he said, standing to shake my hand, "it's good to see you. What can I do for you today?" "I need to close an account, David," I said, my voice even and calm. I sat in the plush chair opposite his desk and slid the bank statements across the polished wood. This one, the custodial college fund for my grandson, Leo Jensen. Mr. Harris blinked, looking down at the paperwork. He saw the balance and his eyebrows shot up. "All of it? Eleanor, this is a significant fund. Are you sure? Is everything all right?" His concern was genuine, but my resolve was absolute. "Everything is perfectly clear, David," I replied. "I have been the sole contributor to this account for 20 years. It was built on a promise. That promise has been broken. The intended beneficiary has proven himself unworthy of the investment." I didn't need to give him the sordid details. My tone conveyed all the finality he needed to hear. He looked at me, searching my face for any sign of hesitation, but found none. He nodded slowly. "All right, Eleanor, it's your money. I just need to advise you that liquidating an account of this size might have some tax implications and—" "I understand completely," I interrupted gently. "I will handle the consequences. Please proceed." He sighed and began typing at his computer. The process took about 20 minutes. There were forms to sign, signatures to verify. I signed each one with a steady hand. My signature wasn't the shaky scrawl of an old woman. It was firm, decisive. Finally, he swiveled his chair back around. "It's done. The account is closed. How would you like the funds? We can transfer them, or I can issue you a cashier's check." "A cashier's check, please," I said. "Made out to me." He disappeared for a few minutes and returned with a crisp, official-looking check. He slid it across the desk. I picked it up and looked at the number printed in stark black ink. $82,457.16. 20 years of scraped-together savings, of skipped luxuries, of hope for a future that would not come to pass. I folded it carefully, placed it in my handbag, and stood up. "Thank you for your help, David." "Of course, Eleanor," he said, his expression a mixture of professionalism and sympathy. "You take care." I walked out of that bank feeling lighter than I had in years. I hadn't destroyed a legacy. I had reclaimed one. Back in the sanctuary of my home, I placed my handbag on the kitchen table. I didn't take the check out right away. Instead, I made myself a cup of tea and sat in Arthur's armchair, the one with the slight dip that still fit me perfectly. The house was quiet. The memory chest was closed, its contents safe and honored once more. The rage and the grief had subsided, replaced by a sense of peace, a sense of rightness. What Leo had done was a betrayal, but it was also a gift. It had opened my eyes. For 20 years, I had poured my energy, my love, and my money into a vessel that was riddled with cracks. I had been building a future for someone who had no respect for the past. My husband had built his legacy on sacrifice and honor. I had tried to build Leo's on money. I finally understood the difference. Later that afternoon, I took out the check and a pad of paper. I started to make a list. The first item was a new roof for my house. Arthur had always meant to replace it, but his health failed before he could. It felt right to use the money to protect the home he had built. Next, I wrote down Vietnam Veterans of America. I would make a substantial donation in Arthur's name, helping men who, like him, had carried the weight of their service for a lifetime. A portion would go to a local trade school, funding a scholarship for a young person who wanted to learn to build things with their hands, just like Arthur had. This was a true legacy, not just an inheritance, but an investment in the values he held dear. The rest? I would use it to live, to travel a little, perhaps see the Grand Canyon he'd always wanted to show me, to enjoy the years I had left without scrimping and saving for a future that was not my own. That evening, I picked up the framed photograph of Arthur in his dress uniform from the mantelpiece. It was the one I loved best, the one where he was young and handsome, and his eyes shone with integrity. I polished the glass, just as I had polished his medals. I looked at his face and smiled. "I took care of it, my love," I whispered to him. "Your honor is safe." I placed the photograph back in its rightful place, the centerpiece of our home. I had not emptied a legacy. I had simply transferred it from an unworthy recipient to a cause and a life that would truly honor the memory of the man who had earned it. The college fund was gone, but Arthur's legacy was more secure than ever.